So welcome back, lecture number 2. So again, we're going to pick up this catalytic market process and bring in what I call specialization and trade, okay? So I'm going to start with specialization and trade, talk about comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and Matthew will continue with that idea in the next coming lecture, right? So we're going to spend talking a lot about specialization and trade because I think it's foundational to the science of economics. I mean, economics is a science of exchange. There's nothing else to it. It's exchange. And the exchange happens. What precedes exchange? Before I exchange with you, I must do what? I must specialize. I mean, how am I going to exchange with you, right? So I must specialize in the production of a good so I can exchange it with you. And economics is a science of exchange. Nothing more, nothing less. Economics is the science of the implications of exchange. But when I specialize, who decides, who determines what I should specialize in? Who determines what I should specialize in? I'm producing coffee, you're producing tea. People like to consume both, right? So I'm going to give you some coffee and then get tea. But who decides that I should be the one producing coffee and you should be the one producing tea? Who determines the mode of specialization? What are the factors that determine?
Consumers.
Well, consumers determine what should be produced and how much they want to consume of it. But if there is a need for a good or a service, consumers want coffee and tea, right? And me and Ajani, we're going to decide what determines that I should produce coffee and he's going to produce tea or vice versa.
Comparative advantage.
Comparative advantage. So we're going to talk about comparative advantage, we're going to talk about absolute advantage. I'm going to introduce those terms to you. Matthew will come, will give you a numerical example. Maybe tomorrow I'll give you another additional numerical example just to complement, because it's such an important ingredient in an emergent market order, specialization and trade. So what determines what I should specialize in is my comparative advantage. It's like what I'm simply stated is what am I the best at doing? I can produce apples, I can produce tomatoes, but I'm better at producing tomatoes. When I say the word better, that means I have relatively higher productivity, okay? It could be a case that I'm better than you at producing two goods. Imagine you and I, in a society, I'm better than you at producing apples and oranges. Okay, so Abla is my next door neighbor. It's a village with only two people. His family, or two families. His family, my family, okay? Or Abla and I. So I'm better at producing apples. I have the know-how, I have the technology. My land climate on my side of the village is better. And also, I have better technology and know-how and tacit knowledge in the production of apples and tomatoes, right? Tomatoes as well. I'm more effective, etc. So I'm better at producing both goods. Abla is my next door neighbor across the village, on the other side of the village. So should I trade with Abla? I'm better at producing apples and oranges or tomatoes than Abla. I can spend less time producing tomatoes, less effort. I can spend less time and less effort and less resources to produce tomatoes and to produce apples. Do I need Abla? Should I trade with Abla? Yes or no? Should I trade with Abla if I'm better than him at producing both goods?
Yes.
No. There is a no.
Yes.
Yes. No. I have no, yes, no, it's like a playing piano, no, yeah, do, re, mi, fa, do.
Yes.
Yes! You don't know? Karen?
I was distracted.
Yes.
Of course, yes. 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 Who said no?
I should know.
You said no and you said no. If what you're saying is true, there'll be chaos right now in this classroom. We wouldn't exist. The human species wouldn't have survived. We would all be dead. That's the beauty of specialization and trade. Trade is not based on differences in absolute advantage. So let me give you an example so you understand. Everyone knows who LeBron James is, right? the two people that say no, right? So LeBron James, right? Let's say painting this house, right? This room. Who's better, do you think? He's better than you at painting this room. Also, he's better than you at maybe playing basketball, right? So he's better than you at both. He's fast, he's strong, he's tall, he can paint. So he's better than you at producing both. So that means he doesn't need you? Or would you both benefit if he specializes in the good in which he has the highest absolute advantage, which is playing basketball? So you paint his house and then he does specialize in basketball. So this is the essence of our existence as human beings. This idea is called comparative advantage. Okay? Comparative advantage, it says that trade is not based on differences in what you're better at. I'm better than you at I'm better than you at lecturing economics, and probably I'm better than you at making food at home. But I'm much, much better in producing lectures in economics than cooking, even though I'm better than you in both. But I specialize in lectures and you become my chef and my cook. Okay? So that's the benefit. So even though I'm better than you at both, nevertheless specialization and trade benefits both of us. Okay? That's the essence of a market catalectic order. So, in the previous lecture, we discussed the concept of catalexy, the spontaneous order that emerges from voluntary exchanges in the market. In this lecture, we are going to explore how specialization and trade play a pivotal role in this process. Specialization and trade are fundamental to understanding how decentralized interactions in the market lead to prosperity and economic growth. The division of labor. So, I would like to talk about the concept of the division of labor, right? So, specialization means what? So I'm discovering my comparative advantage, okay? And then based on my comparative advantage, you discover your own comparative advantage, Karen discovers hers, right? And then so on and so forth. So then it leads to a division of labor, the division of labor, right? So the division of labor is a concept deeply explored by Adam Smith. Adam Smith started talking about the division of labor. Allows individuals to focus on what they do best, right, and trade with others for the goods and services they need. This lecture will help us understand how and why specialization leads to higher productivity. So when I'm discovering my comparative advantage, what I'm good at, and I'm producing more of it, productivity is also going up via specialization, right? This is the dynamic process that is absent in mainstream academic textbooks. Your textbook says you specialize in the good in which you have a comparative advantage. Static. What I'm saying, when you start specializing in the good in which you have comparative advantage, not only there is more apples and oranges, but the rate is changing because specialization is making me more and more productive. The more you repeat doing the same thing, the more productive, the more you train, the better player you become, right? That additional productivity gain is absent in most economic textbooks. They just say you specialize in the good in which you have comparative advantage, you trade, and then everybody benefits. But I'm saying that process of specialization has an innate beneficial effect, which is your productivity. You start getting better and better and better the more you specialize. So the lecture helps us understand how one specialization to higher productivity, how trade benefits all parties involved, and the way in which these processes fit into the larger framework of catalexy. Specialization refers to the process where individuals or firms focus on a narrow range of tasks. The division of labor allows workers and entities to become highly skilled in a specific field, which increases overall efficiency. So you're becoming highly skilled, you're specializing, you're getting better and better and better, okay? Not only there are benefits from comparative advantage, but there are now an extraordinary additional benefit from specialization. The example that Adam Smith gave is the pin factory. To illustrate this point, he said, instead of each worker making an entire pin from the beginning till the end, right? We specialize, we divide it into separate tasks. Okay, the work is divided into distinct steps, with each worker specializing in a single stage of production. This division drastically increases the number of pins produced. That's the example he gave. So, comparative advantage, specialization is determined by comparative advantage, a theory introduced by David Ricardo. David Ricardo you know what happened to him when he first introduced the idea of comparative advantage? Queen, Jack, what happened? When he introduced the concept of comparative advantage? In Parliament, England, most of the members of the Parliament were people that were thinking like you. He said that England was better at producing apples and wheat and oranges and tomato, right? And the Parliament, they said, so these are mercantilist. Yeah. What is mercantilism? It's the idea that imports are bad, exports are good, right? You just export, you take the gold, and the nobility and the king become wealthier. And that's how wealth was measured, right? By the wealth of the king. So under mercantilism, David Ricardo comes and he says, people. So at that time, England was better at producing all the goods and services. They had absolute advantage. And they said, we don't need to trade with the rest of Europe. Let's close our borders, produce everything domestically. Right? If I'm better than you at producing everything, I don't need you. So what happened when you cross the borders and I don't need you? If goods and services are crossing borders, then armies will start crossing borders. There are wars, intercontinental European wars, were the result of mercantilist trade policies. Okay? So I come back to David Ricardo. So David Ricardo went in front of the parliament and said the following. He said, please, trade is not based on differences in absolute advantage. Even though England is better at producing apples and tomatoes and coffee, we can still specialize under the comparative advantage. We're good at all of them, but in which good we are much better. We should specialize in that and trade with Europe, and there'll be win-win. It's a positive sum game. You know what they did to him? They imprisoned him. They put him in prison. And then he got out, and then they put him back, and then he got out. Finally, they understood the concept of comparative advantage. Okay? And you're not unique. Most students, some of the students have been exposed to me previously, right? But most students, when I raise this question, most students, half the students would say no. They shouldn't trade. I'm better than you at all of them. I shouldn't trade. But in the real world, you're trading, right? In the real world, you're trading. So trade is not based on differences in absolute advantage, but comparative advantage. And I'm going to give you examples and define what comparative advantage. I think Matthew will pick up with that. Okay? So he was imprisoned until they understood. They said, aha, now we understand comparative advantage. They opened up their border, right? And then the Industrial Revolution came and living standards start going up. People got taller by 2 inches, like, you know. Mortality rate went down, calorie intake went up, right? So now we have like economic progress. The knowledge component, right? We talked about the knowledge component. So this knowledge component is also embedded in our specialization, right? So when you're specializing, this dispersed knowledge, no single person or planet can have all the knowledge. Instead, individuals acquire specific knowledge based on their unique circumstances and abilities. Right? So I asked you earlier, who decides which good I should specialize in? Well, it depends on comparative advantage. But what determines comparative advantage? Why am I better at producing coffee than tea vis-a-vis Ajani over here? Right? Well, it could be I have tacit knowledge. It could be that the climate is better, the soil is better. There could be many reasons. Comparative advantage is determined subtly, right, by the individual. It could have many circumstances could lead me being better than you at producing a certain good or a service, okay? And abilities. There are certain goods and services that require ability. Maybe I'm good in music, I'm good in math, right? So my talents, my abilities, the external environment, the soil, right? The distance, the irrigation systems that I have, the technology that I have in my possession. Am I capital abundant or labor abundant, right? So all of these factors, circumstances, internal and external circumstances will determine in which good I have a comparative advantage. And therefore I pick to specialize in that good. So this dispersed, often tacit knowledge is then harnessed through the price system, leading to effective cooperation. So the genius of a free market is that the marketplace, you don't have to say, guys, I'm the best at doing something. Right? We have a riddle. It's a mathematical riddle. Then there is something, a physical riddle, a task. Then we're in a competition, right? How are we going to decide who's better at what, right? So it's not like command and control. I can't say you guys are going to do a physical task, you're going to do an intellectual task, you're going to do a musical task, right? The market catalogs, it determines what you're good at based on your abilities. But how do you communicate your abilities to millions of people that I have a comparative advantage, not you? That binding element is the price mechanism. Again, the price mechanism comes into place and that binds what you're good at, because then you're able to produce that good or service at a lower cost. So comparative advantage reflects the idea of opportunity cost. Okay? In the marketplace, the theory of comparative advantage, but in the marketplace that translates into cost. If I'm better at producing apples relatively than other goods vis-a-vis you, then that knowledge, I don't have to tell you, I don't have to convince you, listen, you play basketball, I do volleyball. It's just that my actions in the marketplace leads me to produce the good at a lower cost. So lower cost, opportunity cost, indicates my comparative advantage. So the lower opportunity cost is the price of the good or the service. So the price mechanism is telling each person what you're good at. Okay? If I produce a good and she's able to produce it at a lower cost, that means I already know she's better at it. She doesn't need to convince me. There's no conversation, there's no command and control, centralized authority. The marketplace, right? Integrated marketplace is communicating via one another. Millions, billions of people's communication are going on at the same time. Right? It's not a phone call, I speak, you listen, and you speak, I listen. This is like overlapping conversations that's going on, multi-layered, multi-dimensional conversation that's going on at the same time, and everyone is being heard in society. Okay? Lower opportunity cost, that means you have a comparative advantage. And all this dispersed knowledge of what you're good at, what she's good at, all of dispersed information in the marketplace, right, is harnessed. Because I want to harness all this knowledge, I don't want to do something, you're better at it. You do it, I do something, All this knowledge is harnessed, is glued together, bonded together through the price system, leading to effective cooperation, prosperity, and harmony. Gains from trade. Trade is the natural outcome of specialization. So once I specialize, what's the next step? So I discover my comparative advantage. Via the price mechanism and the opportunity cost, I tell the world, I'm producing coffee, you produce something else. I beat you, my prices are lower. My opportunity cost is lower, reflected in the price. Once all of that stuff are established, then what do? I start exchanging, giving and taking, right? Giving and buying and selling. So this natural specialization, so trade, right? Trade is the outcome of specialization. I specialize and then I trade. When individuals specialize in producing certain goods, they inevitably need to exchange with others to acquire what they do not produce themselves. Trade allows individuals to benefit from the specialization by accessing a wide range of goods and services, resulting in interconnectedness and greater overall welfare. So with trade, right, you have options, right? I mean, imagine alone I could produce one type of a coffee, but when you specialize in tea, then I have access to varieties of coffees, right? Varieties of people are competing in the coffee market, so I have better quality products because you're getting better as you're specializing in it, and this creates interdependence in the marketplace. I can't emphasize, I'm putting interdependence because it's very important to me, because we will not have wars and conflict and aggression in the future. What we're seeing today, the wars that's happening in Ukraine, Middle East, other parts of the world, these are the last vestiges, remnants of an old, right, retrogressive mindset, right? We're getting deeper, and yes, in the past, war was in equilibrium because There is land, the most important factor of production, and different groups want to take over the land. This land is arable, it's better climate, it has rivers, lakes, etc. It's more productive, so you take over the land, etc. Right? And our relationship was minimal in the sense that our cooperation as human beings was minimal. We're all agrarians, we're all farmers. It's not like there is like a deep specialization that's going on. Very shallow specialization. So yes, if the specialization is shallow, then that leads to conflict. But since the Industrial Revolution, specialization is getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper it gets, the more interconnected we are. Okay? So if just people come to their senses, they should not wage war against one another because we are so interdependent. If you think about it, I have no gain by taking your land because land is valueless. Land doesn't have value in the production process nowadays. Okay, it's the least important factor of production. We're growing like vertically, hydroponics. I mean, we use less land today to feed planet Earth than we did 100 years ago, even there was a boom in population growth rate. Okay, the value that's produced in a building in that invents and innovates in Palo Alto or produces more value than a whole land of like where wars are being waged on. Okay, what's important today as a factor of production is not land, is not the natural resources, etc. What's the most important is our ingenuity, creativity. It's our mind, and that is not violable. If you have land, if land and labor are important, then I will come, enslave you, make you my slave, okay, I will conquer the land. That's what they did, right? Europeans came to these parts of the world, they enslaved people from Africa, and they got the land they caught by force, and they put the land and the slave together, and they produced tobacco so they can send it back to Europe so Europeans can sell it to the rest of the world. That was the trade, right? So nowadays, neither land or unskilled workers, labor, has any value in the product. They have value, but they're the least valuable. The most value that is created is the human ingenuity. We don't need land because we're more productive. We don't need labor, we don't need slaves because we can have robots. They're more productive. We can have automation that do the job of the slaves. So nowadays, because of the division of labor and the technological advancements, it is absurd to me that anyone would wage a war to get more land, or anyone would enslave other people so they can work for it. So the idea, it existed in the past under mercantilist economic system. That's not part of the capitalistic economic system. Capitalism is not a system of exploitation or enslavement or conquest, right? Conquest, and violence and enslavement was a system of under mercantilism. It's a different market system, okay? Because there is an idea out there that capitalism is leading to exploitation. This is all false, okay? It has nothing to do with the system of capitalism. So now, the point I'm trying to make is the following. That so the most important factor nowadays is your mind, is your ingenuity. You can create more value in your office than all the minerals and the values that exist in a large, piece of land, right? You can create more value. So therefore, so the difference is the land and the labor are viable. That means I can take the land, I can enslave the workers. But your mind is non-viable. Because if I want to come and acquire your mind by force, you can't think. The only way you can invent and innovate is under the freedom principle. So you're non-viable. So my expectation is that if we move forward into the future, we will not see wars, we will not see enslavement, because I want the most. How can I get the most out of you, Jack? I enslave you is limited benefit to me. I take over your land that you have, your house and your car and your shoes is limited. I can get more from you, from your mind, and that's not viable. I'm not saying I'm nice, I want to violate you. I want to steal your mind and put it in my backpack and then use it when I need. But that mind is not going to work. Your mind, your ingenuity is non-violable, right? So therefore I would foresee in the future that we don't have any of these violations. But Karen, you want to add something?
Well, I think because you're pointing in the future, so I was thinking about land and we're saying that, you know, there's no market failures or consumers get what they want, but I think a lot of people would love a cheap house in California. Most people, consumers can't get a cheap house in California.
Mhm.
The market does not provide a cheap house in most parts of California. So how would that be looked at, right? That's what consumers want, but consumers can't get it.
Listen, I want many things, I can afford it. I mean, that's the beauty of the market. If you can afford something, then you work for it. So if you can't live in California, you move to another state. The market decides what the value of a price of a house is, the buyers and the sellers. It's not set by the sellers, there's no cabal of people like, you know. So the market decides, somebody is desiring it more than you, and you're desiring it less. Some people are willing to forego more other benefits than leave, you know. So the market decides, and how do cities grow? Cities grow, they get to a point where it's like too congested, and then people out of, you know, they can afford it, it becomes very, you know, expensive, then may move and other cities start. I mean, that's how we're gonna conquer like planet Earth, we're gonna inhabit planet, I mean, you know, it's a natural phenomena. Many people don't have the means. I'd rather buy a house in Beverly Hills than in, you know, La Crescenta, but I don't have the means, so I wouldn't consider that as a market failure. I consider that the market is telling you be more ambitious, work harder. I consider that the market is telling you, you know, it's about time maybe you start, people move to other cities, create other cities, other spaces. So the market is fluid, it's you know, but it's a good question. You mentioned the word externality, okay? Because as part of our curriculum, we're thinking about idea. By the way, I have like an interesting few comments to make. Number one, we're going to have a super exciting pillar number 3, okay? We are bringing in like super exciting faculty, new faculty. One of them is a legend, leader in the world of anarchic order, David Friedman. He's signed up, he's coming in person. Okay, 2 days in this room, you're going to be in the presence of David Friedman. He's the son of Milton Friedman, okay? He has a PhD in physics. He teaches law, but he writes in economics. His book is called The Machinery of Freedom. I think you should order it. Get a book, bring it with you. Maybe if you're lucky, you can get a signature out of it, okay? He's on schedule to lecture on Saturday and Sunday. He's going to spend the night at this hotel. So, and you can ask him that question about externalities, one of his specialties, right? Another note I want to make that we're thinking having debates. So the Menger Institute will make a statement. Will say that there is no such thing as market failure, and we're going to say it out. We're going to send it out to our 500-600 subscribers now. We have social media, etc. And we're accepting, you're going to write a paper, 4 or 5 pages, a short paper, arguing that there is such a thing as market failure, and we're going to provide you the rebuttal. So a member of the Menger Institute is going to give you the rebuttal, and then you know who's going to decide? The subscribers. So we'll vote, so it's going to be voting. So you're going to read Karen's argument, for example. Karen is saying there's a market failure. She can give the theoretical argument. She's going to give us examples that markets are failing. And then I, or a team member from the Menger Institute, is going to reply to rebuttal. We're going to say, and then the subscribers will go, they read both, and they vote. And the winner, if she ends up winning, she gets a prize. And it's $100 for now. Okay? And if we're excited, I think we want to do it every 3 months. Hopefully next year when everything, because we're still evolving as an institute. So hopefully next year we do it on a monthly basis. And then imagine all these ideas, controversial ideas, and then rebuttals, like we can put it together, turn it into a book. It would be a perfect way to study market economics and anarchic order via these debates, right? So that's coming up. And the first one is going to be probably externalities. So we're going to get rebuttal, right? We're going to get a lot of essays or, critiques that market's actually failing. We're going to pick the ones that are the most, add value, and then we're going to publish both in our rebuttal. And you get to vote. Okay? And the winner gets $100. If we have more funding, I want to take it up to $500, $1,000, okay? And we're going to win. And we're going to win. And we're going to call this, Peter, the third calculation.
You want to give the history behind the name?
Yeah, so it's called, yeah, could you all go ahead, tell us the history behind the name? We're going to call this debate.
The third calculation debate, or calculation 3. I'm unsure whether and to what extent who is familiar with the original socialist calculation debates that occurred shortly after the founding of the Austrian school in its homeland, and in mine too, in Austria. There were two calculation debates. One was about, well, the second was about calculation, right?
The first
How
one
would you
was about
distinguish?
methodology,
It was, yeah. The
methodondres.
second was about calculation.
The second one is about under the socialist commonwealth, economic calculation is impossible. So Austrian economists had two debates in their history, right? One of them was on methodology at its foundation. They fought against the German school that they should use the deductive methodology, which we talked about last lecture, versus the inductive methodology. So there was a debate. It was actually the German historical schools that they call them Austrians, you know, to like, oh, it's a small piece of land, we're bigger. These Austrians are doing economics in their own way. That's why it's called Austrian economics, like to belittle them. So it was about methodology, epistemology, the science of how we know what we know. Austrians picked up the deductive methodology. The German historical school picked up the inductive, or what we nowadays call the scientific method, which is unscientific, right? Aggregation of data, running regressional analysis, theory, hypothesis, observations, and things like that, right? So that was one debate. And the second debate that the Austrians had, Karl Menger, Hayek, against socialists. They said like economic calculation is not possible, like catalepsy, right? The price production of, there will be shortages and surpluses because economic calculation is not possible in socialist market environments, right? Because they don't have a price, absence of price mechanism. So there were debates that goes on. So that's why we're going to call ours the third calculation debate, okay? And we're going to generate all this like questions and, you know, our views, and we're going to get some papers, like rebuttals back and forth, and we're going to let you, the subscribers, decide, you know, who wins. And then if we lose, which we're never going to lose, okay? Menger never loses. If we lose, then you get a prize, right? Now we're going to give you $100 prize. So that's the idea we're coming. But I think we have a super exciting pillar number 3 is going to be super exciting. Not only David Friedman, we might add another new faculty, okay? And I'll keep you posted, we'll send you an email. So exciting stuff are happening at the Institute. Sorry, Disha, you had a question and I'll come back to you. Earlier you raised
Yeah, we were talking about the housing situation in Southern California as a potential market failure, and I feel like this is one of those moments where like we can't really talk about the market because of how deep the government is involved. Like I'm actually taking a class on housing problems and policy in LA, and the two biggest things, problems are zoning and how expensive it is to rehab buildings that are already there. So like the government is actually getting in the way of like the housing supply doing what it's supposed to.
It's expensive because the costs of construction are high, and that's a market issue.
That's actually a Fed rate problem. Because builders and the construction loans and like the way that money works is all actually decided by like the Fed Reserve interest rate. Because they
How much
decide.
it costs to hire people to do construction is,
Because it's all loans. The loans are what make the construction companies able to build in the first place, and those loans are being given out at low rates. Like if you bought a house prior to 2021, your mortgage was probably under or around like 5%. Now the minimum is like 7-8%. So people aren't buying, like it freezes construction when they raise the interest rate.
I mean, even if housing prices are going up in a market, that means the market is saying you can't buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you should be. It's not a market problem if you can't afford certain goods or services. The market doesn't guarantee to you that you should have a car, health insurance, that you should have food, that you should have medicine, education. The market doesn't understand. The market gives you the best based on what you have and what your capabilities are, what is your contribution to the market. That's how much you get out of the division of labor. The market, then if the price is high for you specifically, then you should get a hut, or maybe cohabit with someone else, find a roommate, or live out of the market. I'm not saying that I'm saying the market would give you fair and square to the best of your capabilities, to how much you contribute, that's how much you get out of the marketplace. I'm not saying that the market guarantees any of the necessities of life. It doesn't, it shouldn't. But the marketplace left alone would be the most prosperous. So then interventionism. Interventionism is short-term goals. Yeah, you said maybe you don't have housing today. Intervention gives you housing. But I want housing for eternity, for everyone. We mentioned about poverty, right? Yeah, some people are poor today. But my goal is to end systemic poverty. Systemic poverty, every time the government intervenes to help Matthew, an individual, right, in the marketplace, help him out via welfare programs, subsidizing his education, subsidizing his healthcare, subsidizing his housing, etc. It helps Matthew, then systemic poverty will remain in place. That is not the solution. It's only in a market economy that we can get rid of systemic poverty. There'll be a market-determined poverty, not fiat poverty, but market-determined poverty. And I don't have a problem with that. Because historically, we started in abject poverty. The starting point, the status quo is poverty. So instead of critiquing poverty, let's start, that's the starting point. That's how it started. Let's look at prosperity and say, how did this culture, how did Djerdjian achieve prosperity? How did the tribe achieve prosperity? So the focus should be on prosperity rather than poverty. And the focus should be on poverty as systemic poverty rather than an individual person being poor for a particular reason. Maybe he's lazy. Maybe he doesn't have the means. Maybe he doesn't have the cognitive capacity. Maybe he's a criminal, right? Nobody wants to talk. So individual poverty comes for different reasons. I don't know what the different reasoning is. I can't figure out each person why you're poor, okay? So my issue, the solution of a market economy is to eradicate poverty, not individually looking at an individual, but eradicating poverty and market poverty. I'm not really interested I'm interested in eradicating fiat poverty, okay? There'll be poverty in the marketplace. The market is telling you, listen, given your cognitive capacity, you made entrepreneurial errors. We're talking about the uncertainties in the market. You took all your funds, all your money, and you took a risk. Entrepreneurial uncertainty. Risk that doesn't have probability outcomes, right? We talked about earlier. And then you lost your money. And then what does that mean? Then you don't have money to buy a house in California. That means you took a risk. It didn't work out. You took a major in college that has no value in the marketplace. You majored in, let's say, economics, and it doesn't have value. Or you majored in, international relations. It doesn't have market value. And that's a subjective decision you made. And then the market is saying, well, you made mistakes. You you picked up the wrong major for the wrong reasons, or you took risks and it didn't pay out. And the market is saying, well, you can't live in California, you must move to another housing in another part of the world where it's more affordable to you. And that's the dynamic process of the market. By the way, these entrepreneurs, they fail 90%, 95%, all these entrepreneurial works, they fail. They take a risk on certainty. They put all their money in one basket. They gamble with their life, with their time, with their effort. It doesn't pay out, doesn't pay out, doesn't pay out. 1 out of 100, out of 1,000 hits. And they become like the normal people that we know, the 1%ers or the giants of their industries. It's very rare, it's very difficult. Some people, even if they have the cognitive capacity, they don't have the energy, the determination. Some people are risk averse. If you're risk averse, right, then you can live in California because you have a job, you graduate, you keep getting, it's like comfort. The risk takers, when they fail, then they pay the price. It's a choice that you made. You took a risk, didn't pay out. You know what I'm saying? Then you get out of California because you can afford the housing. So I really don't know where is this not being able to afford food or housing, where it's coming from. What determined it, right? I'm interested in investigating prosperity, right? How, because the status quo is poverty, let's investigate prosperity. and let's end fiat poverty, and let's end, and the marketplace will have an innate mechanism that I think we're eradicating poverty, a market-determined poverty. Most poverty is fiat poverty. In the world, most poverty is fiat poverty, is because of interventionism. But we're going to come back, and we have a whole pillar dedicated to interventionism, and so we'll talk more about these ideas. But let's come back to the gains from trade, right?
Yes, something to say.
Oh, sorry.
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to mention as well, like, I think monetary intervention leads to price intervention, and this can distort the prices of certain markets, like housing, and why, like, housing prices keep going up. Perhaps it should be going down, but we don't see that because we live in an interventionist society.
And let me add one more thing. You said housing prices are going up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
Okay,
saying
well,
it should be going up, I'm just saying in a sense.
It's going up.
Consumer can't always get what they
Okay,
want.
and I'm
that's
telling
not-
you, housing
yeah.
prices is not going up. Your money is getting devalued.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a difference.
Right.
Housing prices are not going up. Your money is getting devalued. And why is your money getting devalued? Because of inflation. Thank you. Because of inflation. The value of the house is not going up because all the prices are going up, right? So it's not like, oh, let me buy myself a house, the value is going up. No, you can buy anything. The money is getting devalued, and that's via monetary and fiscal policies. We can afford houses. It's not a market because we can. Why shouldn't we afford houses? Less people can afford houses. It has nothing to do with the marketplace. It has to do with interventionism. The more you intervene, and these are the butterfly effects. I don't even know which intervention is affecting that. Is it the interest rates? Artificial? This is the consequences of interventionism during the COVID times, right? The whole 2007, 2008 housing bubble and housing crisis, it was all started in 2003 with the House Dream Act, when they intervened and they subsidized the loans, and then they guaranteed the loans. So moral hazard led the banks to give out more loans than they would otherwise give. You know what I'm saying? So all these distortions are all the results and the consequences of interventionism. Nothing happens that we have less housing prices not going up just like go on its own. There's a reason behind it. The technology is going up. Housing prices should go down. It's just basic common sense. And don't tell me land is becoming scarce. We have so much land. So take a drive to Vegas from Los Angeles. It's all empty land. Planet Earth is literally empty. Okay? It's not like it's becoming scarce resources. No, resources are not becoming scarce. We have more land today. The whole planet, 70% of the world is oceans. We can seize that. The technology exists. Okay? It's like we have no shortage of land. We have no shortage of, the universe is ours. So prices are just going up because of interventionism. There's nothing explains that price. So alternatively, which is, the value of the money decreasing rather than the price. So real prices are not going up. Nominal prices are going up. Gains from trade. The mutual benefits of trade can be seen in a very simple example. Consider a farmer grows wheat, carpenter builds furniture. This relationship, right, makes it that you specialize. The carpenter specializes in furniture, the farmer specializes in wheat, and they both exchange. Subjective valuation. I would like to talk about briefly. I'm not going to take too much time because I want to stop because Matthew is coming in and he's going to talk more about specialization and trade. But I would like to add that trade is a positive sum game. What does it mean trade is a positive sum game? That both parties
Will always benefit.
will always benefit. Otherwise it doesn't take place. This is tautological. This is tautological. Trade could be in the labor market too. Oh, like this firm is not paying good wages, and then, no, don't take the job. Obviously, you're taking the job, even at $1 a day, that means it benefits you because it's voluntary, okay? Can you give me an example of a zero-sum game? An activity that I like a lot, which is playing
Poker.
poker. When you play poker, a game of poker is zero-sum game. If Abla loses $100, I win $100, right? Minus 100 plus 100, so it's a zero-sum, plus minus, right? Trade is a positive-sum game. It's not like the big country benefits at the expense of the small countries. As a matter of fact, I have a paper published that smaller countries benefit more by trading. I'm not too proud of it because it's in the mainstream tradition, but I think it's published, refereed paper. You know, I look at how smaller countries can actually benefit more. And in the real world, deductively, smaller countries benefit more because they bring in all the goods and the services from the rest of the world and they produce one good, you know. There are countries like that in the world. So positive sum game. Increased productivity, I talked about, the more you specialize, the better you become at it. And that's a dynamic additional game to specialization. When I'm doing what I'm best at, I'm even becoming better and better at it. We talked about the role of the entrepreneur in this environment, right? Entrepreneurship. Dynamic adaptive market order, we talked about this. Social cooperation and the broader society. Again, I can't emphasize, and I'm going to come back talk about this maybe tomorrow, the broader implications of the division of labor. It's not just economic, okay? It's the human interaction that we get out of it. And I talked about like pre- and post-industrial revolution, okay? Pre-industrial revolution, there is conflict all the time. Shallow division of labor, minimal division of labor, mechanical solidarity. Durkheim calls it mechanical solidarity. Deeper specialization, it's called organic solidarity. And I'm going to talk about the implications of shallow versus deeper specialization, the implications and the provision of law, right? So we're gonna have an interesting lecture coming up. Peaceful relationships. When we trade with one another, I have a vested interest that you're healthy, Ablai. You're my neighbor. I'm producing apples, you're producing bananas. I like to consume more. I like to make a smoothie that has apples and bananas. I have a vested interest in your health. Okay, I have a vested interest to any human being on planet Earth. I have a vested interest on someone living on the island of Taiwan where they're producing microchips for our computers. I have a vested interest, you know, someone living in a village in Iran who's producing pistachio. I have a vested interest on someone living in Pakistan because he's producing Pakistani mangoes. I have vested interest to everyone on planet Earth, not the arbitrary borders. It's not like I have a vested interest to someone because he only lives in a politically, you know, bordered piece of territory, right? So my interest goes above and beyond than these arbitrary borders that we have. My vested interest is towards any human being on planet Earth, because each human being is contributing an incremental know-how in the production of a good or a service that I consume. In conclusion, specialization and trade are fundamental building blocks of the catalactic order. Specialization allows individuals to become more productive, trade lets them to gain, and together they create a network of voluntary exchange, leading to a spontaneous order that drives economic growth, innovation, and prosperity. And there is more conclusions, just summing up what we've seen, and that's the end of the second lecture. Okay, so let's take 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back to